Tonight, 13 years in prison for the man who tormented Amanda Todd before her death. An end to a case that got attention around the world when we learned the agonizing story of a BC teen that changed the conversation about cyberbullying.
Justice for Amanda. This will make a difference in the world for the kids. We did it. We did it for you.
The lasting trauma of living through weeks of convoy protests in Ottawa.
Just was an assault on my hearing.
I would describe it as intimidation with a truck.
But did it warrant the unprecedented response? And housing sales down, prices down?
I definitely see some potential in the market right now.
Could this be Canada's new real estate reality?
This is The National with Ian Henemansing.
Tonight, the parents of Amanda Todd say they finally have justice. The man who spent years tormenting their teenage daughter online before her suicide has been sentenced to 13 years in prison. That's more than prosecutors had asked for in a case that made headlines around the world. 10 years ago, in 2012, Todd was just 15 years old when she shared a video describing how she was lured online, harassed relentlessly, and sexually extorted, which left her struggling with anxiety and depression. Weeks later, she took her own life. Her tormentor was 44-year-old Aydin Coban from the Netherlands. Lindsay Duncombe now with what his sentence means for Amanda Todd's family.
A decade almost to the day since Carol Todd's 15-year-old daughter killed herself, a sentence more than the grieving mother had hoped for.
This will make a difference in the world for the kids, and I have to hope that Amanda's watching from somewhere to see what her voice did for everyone.
Amanda Todd shared her story with the world in a heartbreaking online video posted shortly before her death, alerting so many to the horrors of cyberbullying on the internet.
Here inside my head.
The torment began when Todd was just 12. That's when a Dutchman, Aydin Coban, shared a topless photo of the child with her contacts. Using several aliases, Coban spent 2 years exploiting the teenager, forcing her to participate in online sex acts and then posting the images. In August, Coban was convicted of extortion, harassment, communication with a young person to commit a sexual offense, and possession and distribution of child pornography. Justice Martha Devlin's sentence, 13 years in total, was a year more than the Crown had requested. She told the court he did cause profound harm that contributed to her mental health issues, depression, and substance use. Ruining Amanda's life was Mr. Coban's goal, and sadly, one that he achieved.
To give him 13 is sending a message. It's saying that this type of behavior will not be countenanced.
This sentence is scheduled to begin after Coban finishes a Dutch sentence for similar crimes. The 44-year-old has 2 years left on an 11-year sentence in the Netherlands for similar offenses against 33 young girls, some as young as 9. Todd's family doesn't want any other family to endure this kind of loss.
And so we all have to learn from this.
I just miss her, and I hope she sees we got her some justice.
Lindsay Coban was here, obviously, in British Columbia for his trial, but it appears he won't be serving his sentence here.
No, under the terms of the extradition agreement with the Netherlands, he has 45 days to return to his home country. As the family understands it, Ian, what happens next is that a Dutch judge will review today's Canadian sentence and determine how much more time he will serve in his home country.
And Lindsay, the judge explained why she decided to hand down a longer sentence than what the Crown was recommending.
Yeah, and there were a couple of reasons for that. One, to serve as a deterrent for potential online predators, and also, Ian, to serve as a warning to young people and others that appearances on the internet can be deceiving.
All right, Lindsay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We're getting a clearer picture of what it was like to live in downtown Ottawa this winter when those convoy protesters rolled in and camped out for weeks. As Rafi Bouchikanian shows us, the testimony of residents took center stage at the inquiry into the government's use of the Emergencies Act.
Protesters occupied downtown Ottawa for about 3 weeks, but residents say the impact lingers.
The long-term effects are loss of hearing, loss of balance, some vertigo, triggered by the sound of any horn now, triggered by certain music. It just was an assault on my hearing.
They would increase their honking and target their honking and shout at us.
Downtown resident Zexi Lee was the face of a class action lawsuit that resulted in an injunction to stop the blaring horns. She told the public inquiry into the government's use of the Emergencies Act to quell the protest that police didn't do enough.
The people that are supposed to help you weren't helping you.
Lawyers for Ottawa police challenged that, pointing out they responded when she received online threats.
And the Ottawa police actually attended your residence a couple of occasions as well, correct?
That is correct.
The Emergencies Act had never been used before. The inquiry is looking into whether the protest met the bar to invoke it. A lawyer for some in the convoy argues it didn't.
You didn't see anything that could be classified as espionage or sabotage?
No.
You never saw any protesters or truckers physically harm anyone, is that right?
I would describe it as intimidation with a truck.
The inquiry also heard from an Ottawa city councillor who said the protest forced him and his family from their home.
Any public office holder, our information can unfortunately be found online in some instances, and I believe that that's how protesters were able to find my home address and show up.
He said police didn't respond to his report of threats and criticized the former Ottawa police chief's handling of the protest.
You have the chief slowly who's saying, I need 1,800 new officers to resolve this. At the same time saying, this is not a policing matter. This is there's a political way to fix this. You know, so that is the erosion of the support that I had for Peter Slowly.
Rafi, the inquiry continues next week and some big names are expected.
Ian, will be hearing from Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson, his city manager, as well as the former chair of the Ottawa Police Board. The mayor and the city manager, you'll recall in particular, were involved in some negotiations with some convoy organizers around the idea of moving trucks away from the downtown core. But of course, it's the federal government that invoked the Emergencies Act, and we don't expect to see the Prime Minister or his ministers take the stand for another few weeks.
Thanks, Rafi.
You're welcome.
Now to the U.S. Capitol, a new reaction tonight to the January 6th committee's vote to subpoena Donald Trump. Paul Hunter now with the former president's rambling response and the big question it raises.
They have dissuaded him from coming to Capitol Hill.
Just in case you haven't seen enough of what played out January 6th, even more video now, newly released from a forthcoming documentary, here as word spreads inside that Donald Trump would not be allowed to join rioters on Capitol Hill.
Oh, he comes, I'm going to punch him out. This is
Oh,
my
wow,
moment.
I would pay to see
I've
that.
been waiting for this, for trespassing on the Capitol grounds. I'm going to punch him out, and I'm going to go to jail, and I'm going to be happy.
But as Americans now consider that moment from nearly 2 years ago,
Ms. Cheney.
Aye.
Ms. Cheney, aye.
it is the vote on Capitol Hill to subpoena Donald Trump to testify under oath on all that played out January 6th that raises the big question. Will he or won't he?
Is he thinking about it? Sure, that's his nature.
Mick Mulvaney, once Trump's chief of staff, predicts he will not.
One of the reasons you're never going to see Trump testify is that this is not a criminal investigation. A lot of the evidence that we've seen would never be allowed in a criminal investigation because it's hearsay or even double hearsay. So I think that's important for people to realize.
Trump, meanwhile, took on the committee itself. In a 14-page document some have described as unhinged, headlined, "The presidential election of 2020 was rigged and stolen," he slams the committee as highly partisan political hacks and thugs on a witch hunt of the highest level with very poor television ratings. But he's silent on whether he'll testify. This as Trump continues his multiple legal battles, civil and criminal, some that risk jail time, not to mention that other larger question, will he run again for the White House in 2024 in the face of all of it? Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Back in this country, the bodies of 2 police officers killed in the line of duty in Ontario this week are back home after a highway procession.
York section, to the front, salute!
Fellow police officers were among those who paid tribute to Constables Devin Northrup and Morgan Russell. They were shot on Tuesday night responding to a call at a home in Innisfil, Ontario, north of Toronto. Investigators say they likely had not drawn their weapons before they were shot. A third officer exchanged gunfire with Christopher Joseph Doncaster, who had a semi-automatic rifle. Doncaster died at the scene. There's concern tonight about rising COVID infections and hospitalizations and what that could mean for a healthcare system already under strain. Thomas Dagla looks at why this fall the worry is different.
It's now an all too familiar fall feeling. As the temperature drops and the colors turn, COVID concerns rise. Public Health Ontario is reporting a 22% jump in outbreaks in high-risk settings, while in Quebec, more than 2,000 hospital patients have COVID, the number slowly climbing since September. No one's calling this a new wave just yet, but
there is a wave that looks like it's starting in Europe with some new variants that are emerging. There's also sort of mini waves happening in different parts of Asia.
No wonder the federal government is paying to air these reminders.
Keep your COVID-19 vaccinations up to date.
Newer bivalent vaccines are rolling out, targeting Omicron subvariants, as officials press more people to consider getting a flu shot. Influenza is set to make a nasty return this season, putting a heavier burden on a hospital system facing extreme pressure.
I've been in emergency medicine for almost 19 years now, and I have never seen the waits that our patients have to endure.
Already this week, Ontario hospitals saw more patients with COVID than in the past 5 months. In Nova Scotia, too, hospitalizations are rising again, while in BC, nurses are dealing with the impact of a protracted pandemic.
We've had people that, were avoiding going to the hospitals who are now really sick and coming to the hospital.
And consider the strain on pediatric facilities, with sick children from the Toronto area transferred to Ottawa for intensive care.
It starts with, a system well before COVID that really wasn't in a stable place.
The fear is COVID and influenza will keep rippling through hospitals, pushing more staff off work.
Canadians have better protection than in previous years with vaccination, but it's the first fall since the start of the pandemic with virtually no masks in public. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
New numbers show Canada's housing market is continuing to cool. Home sales last month were down more than 32% compared to September of last year. The national average price of a home also dropped nearly 7% compared to the same time last year. It's now just over $640,000. Nisha Patel now with what the slowdown means for Canadians looking to buy or sell and what to expect in the months ahead.
With a new baby and puppy, this growing family needs more space.
I definitely see some potential in the market right now.
They're renting an apartment in Toronto, but hope a more balanced housing market may give them an opportunity to buy.
I'm feeling a lot better now that I know that the prices have come down a little bit.
And while prices near the city may still be out of reach, they think they can get in by looking further out.
Let's try a little country living. Let's try something on the outskirts. Maybe I commute for an hour.
Higher mortgage rates are making borrowing more expensive, but slower sales are giving potential buyers an edge.
Buyers have power because they have the ability to put a home inspection in and put in a clause to protect themselves.
Meanwhile, sellers may be stuck in the past. Realtor Sham Galam says many are looking for bids that are unrealistic.
If you wait too long, chances are in the future, I can't predict that, but if prices drop further, then you're losing even more money.
Markets that saw the biggest price jumps during the pandemic are seeing the biggest declines. Over the past 6 months, prices in Ontario and BC have slipped, while prairie provinces are proving more stable.
As soon as the Bank of Canada started to tap interest rates higher, the market completely broke overnight.
As those rate hikes continue to work their way through the housing sector, many analysts predict average home prices will fall 15 to 20% by the middle of 2023. And see a better situation for home buyers by 2024.
that's probably about when you start to see affordability come back into the market, lower prices and lower interest rates on the back end of the cycle.
For now, some home buyers are turning to family to boost their buying power.
We definitely talked to our cousins about potentially all moving in together.
Getting creative to realize their dream of a home they can call their own. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
There's new reaction to a CBC News investigation into prominent lawyer Ellen Turpel-Lafond and her claims of Indigenous ancestry, which don't appear to match the historical record. And tonight, she's issued a statement. She says her father was Cree and that he was adopted, though not in a formal way, by her non-Indigenous grandparents. She had previously declined to identify her father's parentage. She still hasn't addressed a newspaper birth announcement that says her father was born to her grandparents or her treaty status. She does say she's never been given a job based on being Indigenous. Just 39 days after the UK got a new prime minister, the country is once again in deep political turmoil. Margaret Evans looks at the chaotic day for the British Prime Minister as she fights to keep her job.
What a difference a day makes.
Absolutely 100%. I'm not going anywhere.
Since then, the now ex-British Chancellor called home early from meetings in Washington. A visit to Downing Street, a sacrifice made.
Do you feel like you've been betrayed by the Prime Minister?
And a resignation at the Prime Minister's request.
Good afternoon.
I was incredibly sorry to lose him. He is a great friend, and he shares my vision to set this country on the path to growth.
Truss has been criticised for weeks now for announcing plans to slash taxes without saying how she'd pay for them. Now she's trying to settle financial markets and the nerves of her own Conservative colleagues.
I have therefore decided to keep the increase in corporation tax that was planned by the previous government. This will raise £18 billion per year.
But if Truss thought firing Kwasi Kwarteng, appointed Chancellor just 38 days ago, would disassociate her from a plan they both embraced, she was wrong. Of the 4 and only 4 questions she took from journalists, all focused on her credibility.
Can you explain to the public why you think you should remain as Prime Minister? What credibility do you have?
He has to go because of the fallout from it. How come you get to stay?
No surprise, opposition parties are calling for an election.
Another Tory Chancellor isn't the answer to the challenges that we face as a country. The Tories are out of ideas, they're out of time. It's time for a Labour government.
Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon was also scathing.
Liz Truss has already, through her own decisions, crashed the economy and heaped misery on people who were already struggling with a cost of living crisis.
Good afternoon. Truss is gambling on this man, former Health and Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt, to help dig her out of a hole. He'll be the United Kingdom's 4th Chancellor since the spring. Whether he can save Liz Truss from political oblivion is still an open question. Never mind the U-turns, this is a Prime Minister turning in circles, so say her critics who insist it won't be long before she either runs out of gas or is forced off the road by her own party. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
From the political drama at 10 Downing to a stunt by climate activists at London's National Gallery.
Security!
2 activists from a group called Just Stop Oil threw cans of tomato soup onto a Vincent van Gogh painting called Sunflowers. The art is worth about $100 million. Then they glued their hands to the walls.
Are you more concerned about the protection of a painting or the protection of our planet and people? Millions of people are dying in monsoons, wildfires and severe drought. We cannot afford new oil and gas.
The painting was protected by glass and wasn't damaged. It's back on display tonight. Police arrested the activists. The group has a history of these stunts. Back in July, members glued themselves to the frame of Da Vinci's Last Supper in London. A desperate situation is unfolding in Haiti as gangs take over and shelves empty.
If we don't intervene now, people may die. It's that dire.
Why some say international help is not the answer. Some Canadian bosses are tracking their workers even when they're at home.
I enjoy being watched, studied, monitored, surveilled, spied on.
Is it effective or does it alienate workers? And who's going to tell The Rock he got it wrong?
Gonna do this right. Here we go. Let's go, Leafs!
The surprising fan reaction. We're back in 2. A group of Canadian MPs is wrapping up a contentious visit to Taiwan as tensions heat up between China and the self-governed island. Chris Brown now with the welcome for Canada and the condemnation from China.
As Taiwan celebrated its National Day this week, some of the important guests were 5 MPs from Canada.
When our friends are having difficulties, you always want to be by their side.
Visits such as this, which included a stop at Taiwan's parliament and meeting the president, have happened in the past, but never against such a tense backdrop. China's authoritarian leader Xi Jinping is poised to be given an unprecedented 3rd term as ruler this weekend. His explicit goal is to return the island of 24 million people to China, whatever it takes. In August, China staged military drills that some analysts saw as a dry run for an invasion. Taiwan's military also showed off its ability to defend the island. I want to take this opportunity to thank Canada for the high regard and support it's shown for Taiwan, said Taiwan's leader Tai Ing-wen during a meeting with the MPs.
I'd say an eventual confrontation is more likely than not.
This London-based military expert says most Taiwanese favor independence, and high-level visits, including by U.S. House Leader Nancy Pelosi, enhance Taiwan's claim to self-determination and weaken China's position.
Assuming Beijing isn't going to give up on its goal of reunification means that at some point it probably will resort to violence.
Officially, Canada only recognizes commercial ties with Taiwan, not diplomatic ones. And as their visit ended Friday, MPs stuck to that line.
I have stayed very focused on what the point of our visit is. It's to enrich our knowledge and our friendship, and we will continue to focus on that.
China's embassy in Ottawa was predictably unhappy. In a statement, it said the visit grossly interferes in China's internal affairs. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
There is turmoil in Haiti where nearly half the population doesn't have enough to eat after gangs cut off the distribution of fuel as an anti-government protest. Alison Northcott now with the calls for help and for a change in government.
Daily life for many Haitians has been thrown into turmoil. With protests, gang violence, and kidnappings, and soaring inflation, it's a struggle just to get water, food, and fuel. Unemployment, the high cost of living, insecurity, says protester Jean Levelt. It is for all these reasons that I am in the street. Powerful gangs have blocked the main fuel terminal, hampering the operation of hospitals, schools, and the delivery of aid.
Most businesses are not working. Banks open every 2 days or so. Supermarkets have been unable to resupply for most of the last month.
There is also a new outbreak of cholera, and thousands face catastrophic food insecurity.
If we don't intervene now, people may die. It's that dire.
There are calls for the country's unelected Prime Minister Ariel Henry to step down. He was sworn in after the former president was assassinated last year, and some argue he lacks the legitimacy to lead. Henry has asked the international community for help. Haiti's ambassador to Canada says his country needs solutions now that will last.
It's difficult for Haiti to resolve a major problem we have right now without international help.
But numerous interventions in the past have left a legacy of distrust.
It's a very, very heavy burden on us.
In Montreal, Chantal Ismay says many Haitians in Haiti and Canada feel the Haitian government and the international community have failed them.
Why now we would trust these people who have been ignoring the suffering of the Haitian people? Because what's going on, like I said, it's not new. It had been going on for a while and it's been ignored.
Global Affairs Canada has said it's extremely concerned and is carefully considering Haiti's requests for help. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
A much different crisis is unfolding in some First Nations communities.
People are feeling powerless. The gang violence, the drug war, the crystal meth.
Why addiction to meth is a growing problem. And as work from home becomes the norm, some companies are using software to track employees, but has it gone too far? Answers to our quick question next.
Do you work at a place? Does your boss already monitor you electronically while you're working?
He does.
Does your boss monitor you electronically while you're at work?
No, they don't.
What are your thoughts? Should they?
Definitely not. I enjoy being watched, studied, monitored, surveilled, spied on.
I feel like it would be good for productivity.
I think it's an intrusion on privacy. I think it's a violation of privacy. It needs to be monitored.
When you're working online at home, are you being watched by your employer? Are they using software to count keystrokes, track what websites you go to, even look through your webcam? Employees in Ontario will find out soon. New legislation brought in this week will require bosses to tell them. But is that enough? And has employee monitoring gone too far? Digging in on this, we have Jay Gogh, head of product and technology for Awareness Technologies, which develops this kind of software. He's in Princeton, New Jersey, and anti-surveillance advocate Matt Mitchell, who's in New York. And Jay, we'll start with you. What does your software do?
So our software is a agent-based software, which means we develop software that resides on devices, and it monitors what the person is doing. Now, what is being monitored is really totally up to the employers and their policies.
So the range could be, I guess, as simple as just finding out if that employee is active on the computer working from home. But what's the other end of the continuum? Can an employer using your technology activate a webcam or be able to tell what exactly is being typed by the worker?
Yeah, so we're not into the webcam, but yeah, we do cover the whole spectrum from monitoring what websites they go to, as you mentioned, what applications that they're working in, how long they're active, how often do they switch between applications, basically their work patterns, and also, as you mentioned, the keystrokes. That's again an option that employers, if they choose, they can enable that.
Matt, what do you think of all that?
Well, I don't know if anyone else thinks that's a little horrific, but I feel that it is. I think that at the end of the day, it's a little bit disingenuous to say, I'm going to shift the blame on the employer after I've given them the tools of maximum surveillance on the employees. With most tattleware or bossware like this, you have the ability to take a screenshot at any time. If you choose to, the feature has been coded and given to you. You have the ability to rank employees by efficiencies using a proprietary algorithm that is invisible to the employees, and even the people paying for the product don't fully understand. And you can say, oh, I'm looking on my smartphone, I've got 30 employees here. Employee number 1, bottom of the list, not very efficient. When we have robots and machines trying to do human tasks, like tell who's engaged and who's going to maximize their performance and who cares about the company and cares about the product, it's not something that they're possibly able to do. And to even come close to it requires a huge amount of sensors tracking everything from what movements you're making, the sites you're visiting, what apps you're in, what apps are installed on your machine, and things like this. I applaud Ontario on taking first steps by saying, if you're a company with over 25 employees, you have 30 days to tell them that you're using some kind of electronic surveillance tools. But that's not enough because it doesn't protect the employees.
Let me jump into that point and ask that very question. How should employees be protected by companies that perhaps overreach? And let me play you a clip from an employment lawyer.
I think the protections really need to come from the federal and provincial governments. I think that the companies need clear direction from our governments as to what they can and cannot do. I think Ontario is a starting point. It's the starting of the conversation. It's not the end of the conversation.
So, Jay, do we need more safeguards? Are you worried that some companies might take advantage of all the tools in the toolbox that your software provides?
I'll agree with you. There's always a possibility. But here is what I see. I mean, we got literally thousands of clients all over the globe. Now, what do they use it for? A very typical usage is that I have a company, I got 1,200 employees, managed, and most of them have certain levels of expectations on productivity. They're not expecting you to be productive 100% of the time. They have tolerances between, okay, so, below 60%, 70% is an alert, and then they would investigate, talk to the employee even, hey, what's going on here? So, yes, it can be used all the way, but if you look at it, the advantages, if you think of it, this is not evil. As you mentioned, Matt, that this is evil. This is not evil. This is pure digitization of monitoring.
Matt, we have 1 minute left, so that's going to go really quickly. Respond to what Jay said.
Yeah, of course. I don't think that Jay and his team and the technology they're producing are evil, and I would never say that E word. I would say that it is horrific when you think about employers. Like if the software was like, hey, we have a way to look for abuses. We have a way to look for when an employer is abusing the software or doing something they shouldn't. And it reports back to our headquarters and we can do something or we can talk to them about it. But that's not the case. And so I would honestly say that the good folks who try to make this software don't even realize what it's capable of and how it can be abused and misused. And the employees are the ones that will pay that price. I think that, I'm sure Jay's efficiency score is high in the 90s, but I don't have a monitor when I go to work. I have a manager who's a human being who knows me. A robot and a machine monitoring my network and looking at what I do is not going to properly do this. Also,
So
I think if I may just
I was just going to say, I have a manager, and what she's doing is monitoring how much time we have. And you know what, Jay? I'm going to give you 30 seconds for a last comment.
Right. So I would just say that managers have emotions, and you're just trusting that your manager is a good manager. Now, robots don't have emotions. They collect pure raw data. What measures it's just pure measuring mechanism. And then it's turned on to a human who will then interpret and then make good use of it.
We've got two very different points of view of this technology and how it might be used, and our audience can kind of decide how they feel about all of this. But I'd like to thank both of you.
Thank you, Ian, for having me.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Matt, for your point of view.
Jay.
Speaking of technology, it's changing the way kids are being taught.
Can you say some people know how to use semicolons correctly? Yes.
Yep, that's TikTok. Some say it has no place in schools. And crystal meth has taken hold in some First Nations communities. How Indigenous leaders are trying to stop it. That's next. Canada is battling a meth epidemic, cheaper and easier to get than ever, especially on First Nations in the West, where some say it was a driving factor in last month's shocking mass murder in James Smith Cree Nation. Since then, calls for better addiction treatment and resources have only grown louder. Here's Sam Sampson on the search for solutions.
I have so much love because these are people, they're grown-ups, and I taught them in nursery and kindergarten. Their families I'm related to, and I want to help them.
Elder Elaine Fox is trying to save her community from crystal meth. Onion Lake Cree Nation has been in a state of emergency since early 2020, prompted by 3 gang and drug-related murders in 2 months. The crisis continues, fueled by the scars of the past.
Most of them come from dysfunctional families. The families that have never dealt with residential school traumas.
The First Nation straddling the Alberta-Saskatchewan border is not alone.
We need immediate response to any First Nations, anyone that needs addictions support. They can't wait.
After September's stabbing massacre in James Smith Cree Nation, leaders called for better addictions programs, specifically for meth.
People are feeling powerless. The gang violence, the drug war, the crystal meth.
Buffalo River Dene Nation recently reinstated a second state of emergency after assaults on 2 elders. Leaders say the attackers were in meth psychosis. Crystal meth is cheap, accessible, and sweeping through the prairies at record rates. Meth-related deaths have skyrocketed in Saskatchewan and Alberta over the past few years. In Saskatchewan, Indigenous people are the most affected. Since 2016, more than half of meth-related deaths have been First Nations, Métis, and Inuit.
It's replaced alcohol as a drug of choice in most of the young people here.
The RCMP says tackling gangs and the drug trade isn't easy in small communities, even if everyone knows each other's business. Past gang murders are haunting reminders of what can happen if anyone snitches, so it's hard to establish trust.
It's tough to build that in any community, and then you do that in a community where everybody is family and related. It's even tougher to break that barrier, but it's something that has to get done here in order to create change.
These units are now going to be available within this program as a safe place.
These trailers were once used for COVID-19 isolation. Now they'll be safe houses for people displaced by gangs and drugs, complete with security guards. But if someone stays here, they have to get help.
Leadership's desire is not to throw away people.
Chief says what happened in James Smith Cree Nation sparked a sense of urgency.
How do we resolve those internally rather than sending them off to somewhere else where they're not connected to their culture and their identity.
The big baby.
Lloydminster, Alberta is about a half hour south of Onion Lake. It's where Tiara Dillon attends court-ordered addictions treatment.
If it wasn't for my baby, I wouldn't be here today.
Dillon came here directly from jail while in her third trimester with her son, Trent, now 10 months old. She started using meth in Saskatoon in 2018. She says it drove her away from family and into a gang.
The ones that I considered family was the gang that I was affiliated in. Wow. And now that I'm sober today, I don't see any of that family.
Dillon now has a relationship with her mom in Onion Lake. She's in a sober living facility with 5 of her 7 children.
I'm just happy to be sober and to have them being in my life again. I never thought I would make it this far.
Dillon credits this sober living center with her success. It's part of long-term programs offered at residents in recovery.
This is our boardroom where we have a lot of our smaller group sessions in here.
The team helps people find detox and houses them while they wait for inpatient treatment.
I mean, there's still this focus on traditional treatment methods where we send somebody to detox, they go there for 7 days, they go home or go back to work while they wait for a treatment bed, which they do for 28 days, then they're cured and they're all good, back to their normal life. It's never worked. I mean, the recidivism rates, the relapse rates are just through the roof.
Half of the clients here are Indigenous, many from Onion Lake Cree Nation. So they hired Elaine Fox to bring in a cultural aspect to the recovery program. She started early September, helping reconnect people to ceremonies and prayer.
It seems that I'm using the teachings that I grew up with.
And does she see a healthier future for Onion Lake?
Yes, that's my dream, my hope, my prayers. So many lost.
That's what Fox holds on to while she fights meth's grip on her community.
Sam, there was a meeting in Ottawa by members of Onion Lake. What happened?
Well, Philip Chief, the man who runs those trailer safe houses, met with Attorney General and Minister of Justice David Lametti. So he says that they spoke about how to move forward. And one of the big asks is for police officers to be able to enforce First Nations community bylaws. So, for example, Onion Lake wants to be able to evict band members from their houses if they're known drug dealers. Chief also says that they're really still pushing for that in-community addictions treatment.
Thank you, Sam. When we come back, Harry Potter fans pay tribute to the man who played a beloved character.
Dry up, Dursley, you great prune.
Remembering actor Robbie Coltrane and...
Do this right. Here we go. Let's go, Leafs. Let's go, Leafs.
What's the Rock cooking? A slightly incorrect chant, apparently. It's our moment. Next.
Isn't he beautiful? Oh, bless him. Look, he knows his mummy.
Harry Potter fans are mourning the death of Scottish actor Robbie Coltrane, who played gentle giant Hagrid in all 8 films. A celebrated actor long before Harry Potter, Coltrane appeared in dozens of movies and TV shows and won many awards over his 4-decade career. He's also fondly remembered as Detective Edward Fitzgerald in the long-running British police drama Cracker. He died in hospital near Falkirk, Scotland at the age of 72. Some teachers and parents are finding a new source of engaging and educational material for their kids through the social media platform TikTok. As Deanna Sumanak-Johnson shows us, it's just one way the pandemic has changed learning.
These are my friends.
When this professor of child and youth studies started watching TikTok videos with her daughter during the pandemic, she was in for a surprise.
Do you want me to?
Sure, they were dance videos, but also
it's a news source. It's a source of informal learning and informal education. My daughter was using it to really get up to speed on things like war in Ukraine, COVID-19, sexism and racism.
Here's why you need a semicolon.
It's also increasingly becoming a source of more formal learning.
What is wrong with this sentence?
With 4.5 million followers, this 54-year-old English teacher from Arkansas is a star on the platform. She never even had a TikTok account before the pandemic.
While our kids were in lockdown, something happened. And we have to be willing to meet them where they're at. That's why I got on TikTok, because I was trying to put my grammar lessons where they were.
A group of vultures.
Other educators try to find credible TikTok content to share with their classes.
I'm face to face with a polar bear.
Wildlife and Science Channel Animalogic employs hosts who also work in the field, like science illustrator Danielle Dufault.
I feel like nature and wildlife are already so evocative and inspiring that it's easy to find some interesting facts about them and say hey, did you know about this?
But not all educators think TikTok, with all the concerns about its impact on kids' attention spans, has a place in class. Teachers are already struggling to reclaim students' focus after the disruptions of the pandemic, says this expert.
You have to teach kids how important it is to pay attention and to be attentive to the details. Otherwise, all we're doing is it's a kaleidoscope of flashing images and immediate dopamine rushes.
But for this mom and daughter, TikTok was just a bite-sized appetizer to deeper, richer conversations.
Parents and teachers might struggle to understand how important TikTok is to us.
Mom using this small social media window to peer into her daughter's world. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
Gonna do this right. Here we go. Let's go Leafs! Let's go Leafs!
The Rock surprising Maple Leaf fans not just by showing up to a game, but by the chant he used to fire up the crowd. If you follow the Leafs, you know the chant well, go Leafs go. So The Rock didn't quite say that, right? We reached out to a fan who was in the stands. Their reaction is our moment.
Here we go. Let's go Leafs!
So everyone's already excited anyway. It's the Leafs home opener, and of course this could be the year. And the in-between action, they say a special guest is here. And then it was The Rock, and the entire Scotiabank Arena grabbing their phones so they can take video and standing. It was positively electric.
What's up, Toronto?
I don't think anyone expected it, no. Now the funny thing is, it's Go Leafs Go, which is the chant.
Let's go Leafs!
And he started chanting, Let's Go Leafs.
I don't know, it's Go Leafs Go, not Let's Go Leafs, but you know. You go tell him. You go correct him is right.
And everyone's like, maybe The Rock is right. We've been doing this wrong. Let's do it The Rock's way. Give it a shot. And by the way, what happened? Thrilling victory for the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Rock and the Leafs are 1-0, undefeated. He can say whatever he wants. Let's go Leafs.
So the latest in this emerging scandal is a tweet from The Rock. He said he talked to the coach of the Leafs who said, yeah, you can use your own chant. It's fine. As somebody said in that piece, who's going to tell him otherwise? And listen, if I have time, I just want to share a dream I have about The Rock. If anybody out there kind of knows him, his dad was born in Amherst, Nova Scotia. The Rock writes about driving by Amherst one time when he was a wrestler and not stopping into the town. I would love to have The Rock visit Amherst, Nova Scotia. I would love to be there. It would make a great story. So if you know him, please pass on my message. That is the National for October 14th. Join me Sunday for Cross Country Checkup on CBC Radio and CBC News Network, and back here later that night for the National.